Hi everybody, so this is the story part 2 and we're going to look at what your story is. So I'm going to keep this recording quite short and it's going to be something that you can just go back to as and when you want to, because our story is so convoluted, because we've had, however many years of creating it and reconfirming it and reconfirming it and reconfirming it, that sometimes it takes more than one go to actually create the story. But what I'm inviting you to do over the weekend, or when, at any time that you're watching this recording, what I'm inviting you to do is to start almost writing down, if you want to, your own story, how it was created, the beliefs that you have about yourself. And the reason I'm going to invite you to do that is so that then you can understand why you're working from what you're working through. And you can also look at what parts of those stories you are ready to let go of, and what parts of those stories are holding you back from really becoming who you are truly destined to be. So where does our story come from? Well, some people say that our story starts from birth. If we say that your story starts from birth, then part of what you get is you get your parents' stories, because they're doing the best they can and they are living the reality that they live in. And so therefore, when you are brought into their reality and you start to become part of their lives and their world, they're naturally going to teach you their story. So part of your story is going to be your parents' story. So I suppose one of the first places you might like to start looking into doing is actually sitting down and actually writing your parents' story, knowing what you know about them, what their beliefs are. And then connecting to what parts of those you think that you've taken on board, and then connecting to parts of those that you feel you would like to release. So that's the first thing, to actually look at your parents' stories, and to do so without judgment, because at the end of the day they were doing the best they could with what they had, and they got their story from their parents. That's kind of how it goes. So that's the first thing I'd ask you to do. The next thing is that, having created a base story, they then bring us up the best way they know how. And so through each experience, especially in the first 7 to 10 years, what they call the formative years, each experience that we have, we then create a belief of who we are, depending on the age that we are, depending on the cognitive abilities that we are and our developmental stage, and depending on the responses of everything and everybody around us, we create a belief. And so that also then adds to our story of who we are, and whether we're good or bad, whether we're able or unable, all of these things, these are beliefs that create our story. And so another thing I invite you to do then is to actually think about the story that is you. So for instance, there will be some people who will, if we were going to write a story, they would put themselves in maybe the rescuer mode, or they might put themselves in the victim mode, or they might go, everything happens to me. And it's to understand that, again, there is no judgment on this. It's not about judgment. It's about just recognizing what your story is from a place of non-judgment and compassion. And when you do that and you sit and you write down, and you can write, so you can start off with facts. You can start off with simple facts about what you feel happened to you in your life. It can be absolute facts about when you started school, how it was when you started school, what you felt about starting school. It can be if you moved house. It can be if pets died, parents died, grandparents died. It could be if you were bullied at school, all of these things. And it could also be the really good things, because this story isn't about all the bad stuff just. This is also about the good stuff. So it could also be things like if you love animals, if you connect to nature, if you love horses, if you love artwork, music, maths, science. All of that is part of your story. So again, I invite you just to, over the next few days, sit down and write down your story. And again, it's to connect in with all the things that you think are potentially holding you back, potentially preventing you and stopping you being the real, true, authentic being that you know you could be if you just didn't have that thing in the background. Yep. So have a think about that over the next few days. So there's another one as well. Another one is the society that we grow up in, and that also creates our belief system, that also creates our story. And this is all about, for those of us who were brought up with television or films or books or whatever stories, real stories as in fairy tales that we were brought up with, they also are added to the symphony that is our story. So I'm actually going to do that in more detail, because it's something that I talk to clients a lot about the story, especially the romance one. That's a big conversation to have. But just very quickly, just again, as I'm inviting you to write a few things down over the next few days, just have a think about what you were brought up with, the society that you were brought up in, and the rules that brought you up with. So just have a think about that. So what else creates our story? There are a couple of other things that create our story. DNA. Obvious. Why have I got curly hair? Why is it this colour? Why are my eyes the colour they are? That's all DNA. So that is also part of our story, especially if we have parents who will then refer back to, you know, I'm about the only brunette out of a family of redheads in this country. So therefore, you know, I've been brought up with the story of where I get my colour hair from. And so that also creates the story, the DNA. But also what comes through the DNA is all our family history. And so a lot of that also creates our story. And again, if we would like to, we can sit down and write down the story of our family history, anything that we know. So the obvious thing is things like addictions, alcoholism, that kind of stuff we can say gets passed through. But we can also look at family patterning. We can look at patterns that have passed on through the family, from mother to child, from father through the DNA, and also through their own responses to the child as it's growing up. So if that's something that you know a little bit about and you know how to do it, write it down. If not, I'm actually going to do a bit of another video on that, so we can go back into that more. I need to write all this stuff down, don't I? So there's another thing that comes through, and another thing that comes through as far as stories is concerned is if any of us come through with fears. And this is where I want to talk about past life or parallel life regression. The reason I call it that is again, it's all to do with belief system. So if I just call it PLR for the moment. So PLR, with hypnosis and various other things, what we can do is we can allow the psyche to go back or sideways into another experience, and that experience has been brought into this life. And PLR is a really good way of finding, really helpful way of finding the root of issues. Now there are some different theories on this, and I'm okay with whatever theory you want to work with this one. Now there is the past life regression theory, that we have lived many different lives, and this life we may have come through with fears and phobias that we were not able to deal with in other lives. There is the other theory, as I say, the parallel life, that actually we are all amazingly one soul, and we're all living this experience in many different dimensions, and time is not linear, so therefore what we consider as past lives actually is all happening all at once. And then there's the theory that actually all of that is a load of tosh, and all that your subconscious is doing is creating a story that allows you to be able to deal with a fear or a phobia. So I don't mind which one of those you want to buy into. That's absolutely cool. Whichever feels right for you is going to be the one that you do. That's absolutely fine. So within that, as I'm talking and I'm talking about this, my voice is going, which is brilliant because it reminds me of one of the PLRs that I've done that involved arrows and things. So there are quite a few things that I've invited you to do over the next few days, and I'm going to watch this back, and I'll actually take some notes this time, and I will then go back and I will talk in more depth about those few things. There are other options and there are other factors that create our story. So within the next few videos, there's going to be a few other things that will probably pop in. All right, have a lovely day. Bye.